Hello and welcome to the Bankers Masterclass series on digitisation in association with Citi. I'm Joy Macknight, Managing Editor at The Banker, and I'm joined by Ebru Pakcan, Global Head of Trade, Treasury and Trade Solutions at Citi. In this final chapter of the four-part series, we're discussing the rise of environmental, social and governance efforts in trade. Ebru, thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
So a major theme across the financial industry is really around sustainability and ESG and the agenda. You know, sort of what new innovations are coming forward and how do you see the industry really engaging, especially around the trade space?
Sustainability agenda, ESG, and actually more and more we are seeing diversity agenda also really being coupled up with sustainability. It's really a growing theme. And it's really made its way into the boardrooms of many of the major corporations over the last 2-3 years. Europe has been very active, European headquartered companies. But over the last 12 months or so, we're definitely seeing that increasing in US and in other parts of the world as well. And that's actually really interesting as a space in terms of corporations and financial institutions and various other ecosystem players coming together and thinking about what can we do together, because the theme and the objectives are pretty easy to understand. I think the challenge is to think about how do you do that in practice? How do you create the type of targets and objectives that actually one can really work towards and incentivize those stakeholders in the activities related to trade flows in a way which is measurable, it's credible, the representation is appropriate, so that you can actually see the results. I find a lot of people in the industry is worried about doing something just for the sake of doing and not being able to actually prove and show results. So they've been really truly brainstorming with customers about how to approach this. And you really take a step back, look at an end-to-end flow, and start thinking about how to go from A to B and how do you insert those incentives that can actually really further the sustainability goal. I think the actual sustainable solutions themselves are probably going to take us a while, but there is a huge amount of experimentation, and there's some very interesting products which are being put out there.
The interest has increased tremendously, but what solutions really are they looking for? Can you go into any details around some of the solutions that clients are embracing?
When we look at how do you actually in practice implement solutions that can actually further the sustainability agenda, one of the basic things that we've been doing with our clients is to look at their supply chain. And for those clients who's got supply chain financing programs where they've been supporting the working capital needs of their suppliers, one of the obvious areas to look at is to identify those suppliers which are meeting certain ESG goals. It's really up to the corporation to define what type of parameters they'd like to incentivize, and start really putting their suppliers into those groups of ESG friendly versus others, and then you can actually really start creating those incentives about you can improve your pricing, you can come up with more discounted rates, etc. Having said that, and that's perhaps the sort of easier part of the equation, how do you do that differentiation and how do you do that type of certification or representation? And that's an area of challenge where we've been really brainstorming with corporates about how would one do that. There are some players in the industry now who's using big data, and that's very exciting, where actually technology comes to help to identify how can you use that data out there to really verify whether a supplier who's saying they're actually meeting all of these standards are in fact meeting those standards, right? So that has definitely been one area of focus. But outside of that, there are some other, interesting thoughts about as well. There are talks of green loans and green trade loans, and I think all of these spaces will really evolve over time.
And do you see sort of the digitization agenda and the sustainability agenda really coming together?
For me, this is actually really, really interesting to watch how digitization agenda and sustainability agenda are truly intersecting. And that is largely because of the need to be able to do things at scale and to be able to leverage data. Because sustainability is definitely driving some decision making based on data so that you can actually parse information in a way that you're looking at that's an activity which is fulfilling our sustainability goals versus that's an activity which is falling outside of that. So to the extent that that particular trade flow has been digitized, it actually really greatly helps with being able to add more rules and more decision making. And I can see actually artificial intelligence becoming potentially more important in this space as we go into the future. And on the sustainability agenda, I'm definitely seeing the diversity agenda becoming more and more important. So I think there's going to be a really, really close and a good marriage there.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Ebru, and thanks to our audience for listening.
Thank you very much.